God's grace, His mercy, and His peace be with you through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. All right, we're on Daniel chapter 11. We've been doing one chapter of Daniel per night, so that's moving at a good pace, especially for me and for you. And so, just recapping so far, we've looked at, throughout the book of Daniel, we've seen things like the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar, talking about the four kingdoms that were to come. We had Babylon, which was in his days, then the Medes and the Persians, then the Greeks, then Rome, and then Christ would set up his kingdom, destroying all the others and thus establishing his own eternally. We saw the similar thing here in the vision of Daniel of the four beasts, where the lion was Babylon, then you had the bear was the Medes and the Persians, the leopard was the kingdom of Greece, the fourth beast being terrible, being Rome, which of course is ultimately also in our days, not only the Roman Empire, but the spiritualized Roman Empire, namely the Roman Catholic Empire, headed by the Pope. We've seen a similar thing over here in the vision of Daniel chapter 8, which kind of skips the Babylonian. He's moving on from there, but he hits the Medes and the Persians, and then the Greek Empire, and then the little horn, which is three things, really. Remember, it was Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, Antiochus the fourth, Epiphanes of the Greeks. It also, as we saw from especially the Gospel of Luke, refers to the Roman armies that surrounded Jerusalem, and it also ultimately is going to refer to the Pope, the final one, the little horn, the Antichrist that attacks the church. And so, let's just say this. What we looked at in Daniel chapter 9, remember the next chapter after this, described Daniel's prayers for the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. And then the angel gives a somewhat sequence of the timing towards the fulfilling of all things and the restoration of the temple, which a lot of the end of Daniel 9, I believe, is referring to, on one level, Antiochus Epiphanes, how he attacked and made a desolating sacrilege, which we're going to read of tonight in Daniel chapter 11. Those words are used with respect to his efforts to desecrate the temple in Jerusalem. But it's ultimately, later on, in a higher level, going to be fulfilled by the Pope of Rome, who desolates and desecrates the temple of God, the church, trying to create all kinds of trouble towards the end of time. For to the end of time, there will be war, it says in the book of Daniel, until the Christ comes. And in all of these pictures, remember, this is about ultimately Christ's victory. Christ establishing his kingdom in the midst of a world that is dead set against him, waging war, especially in spiritual places, the devil and all of his cohorts, inspiring kingdoms on earth to wage war against his church. But in all things, let's remember, throughout the whole book of Daniel, Christ prevails. His kingdom is established even in times of war. It's built while we're surrounded by enemies. He builds his church in the midst of the wicked world. And in the end, he will slay the little horn. He'll slay the final terrible beast. He'll slay the Antichrist. And he will set up his kingdom, namely the world to come eternally, which is to be delivered to the saints, the Christians, those who are true in him and believe in him at the proper time, to enjoy eternally and forever. So these are all the overarching themes then of Daniel. And so what we're going to see in the book in Daniel chapter 11 is a more careful, I keep picking this up, a more careful prophecy, more detailed, ultimately, of the realm, this kingdom, the kingdom of Greece, heading towards the kingdom of Rome. So we're going to see especially a little bit of this, but also this again. So that's the same stuff we're seeing, but we're going to get lots and lots and lots of details, which Daniel receives in his vision ahead of time, which is a great comfort to us to see that God is the determiner of the destinies of nations. He foresees everything before it even comes to pass. He already knows the end from the beginning. And so we'll start then looking at, we're going to go through Daniel 11 just verse by verse. If you were to just read this without knowing any history, like myself when I first started studying this, it just makes no sense. It's just like, what on earth? Kings of the north and going against kings of the south and an exactor of tribute, and what are you talking about? What is all this? Well, happily, I have relied even more than ever this time on the Kretzmann commentary to help to see the history that is behind all of these things. Now, just to also understand, when we talk about Antiochus, sounds like one guy, right? And it is one guy in a sense, but there were a number of Antiochuses. Just like there were a number of Dariuses. You hear about Darius and it's like, oh, which one are you talking about? A lot of these guys like to use the same name. Gregory the Great, I understand why they'd want to use that name. No, just kidding. No, just kidding. But, I mean, there was an Antiochus the Great, who was one of the Syrian kings, Greek kings of the Syrian era. And he was, but there were names of several Syrian kings from 280 to 65 BC. We're going to look at Antiochus the Great tonight, the king of the north. And we're going to also look at Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who was one of his successors, the third successor from him. So just to know that I'll do my best to explain this stuff as best as I can understand it. I'm going to rely much more heavily tonight on the commentary readings, and so let's take a look at it. The first verse we read says, "And as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him." Okay, now what are we talking about there even at the start? Does that really belong in chapter 11, or as Kretzmann has it, and I would tend to agree, it's at least a good strong possibility, it belongs at the end of chapter 10. If it belongs at the end of chapter 10, then what he's really talking about there is the angel standing up to support the other angel. All right, so the angel of the Lord is speaking here, and he's talking about Michael the prince, and then it says, "And I also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood up to confirm and strengthen him," which could mean even as I stood by to strengthen him. The inference being that the various angelic spirits come to the support of one another when special efforts in behalf of the people or nations in their care are required. The gist of the verse is evidently this, that Michael had been active in overthrowing the power of Babylonia by the armies of Medo-Persia, and that the angel of the Lord had given him mighty assistance in this labor, in the great crises of history, in the change of monarchies, and in the midst of every tribulation, we may rely upon the faithfulness and mercy of our God. In other words, this could be a verse about the very end of chapter 10, namely, the angel of the Lord standing up to confirm Michael. They're up there fighting together. I would think that's a good way to read it. You could say, "As for me in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him." Maybe that's the next chapter in a totally different setting. And I don't know. It could be Daniel standing up to confirm Darius. I don't think so, but the angel who strengthened Darius the Mede as king in the next of the kingdoms of God's determination, he could be standing up to confirm Darius. So, hard to understand exactly what that verse means. It could be any of those, and God give the right answer. But now let's just kind of officially start the chapter with verse 2, which, remember, is going to unfold much more for us. Which kingdom? Especially the kingdoms of Persia, and then the kingdoms of Greece especially, heading towards Rome. Okay, here we go. "And now I will show you the truth. The words to follow then are determined and established by the Lord. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia." Okay, so we're living in these days still. We're told here 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia, in that kingdom. Who are they? Dun, da, da, da. Do you know history? Do you want to get Persian kings for 200 bob, or whatever, Alex, or whatever his name was? Okay, the kings, these are the ones that arose after Cyrus: Cambyses, Pseudo-Smerdis, and Darius Hystaspes. Okay, I wonder how long it would have taken you to randomly guessed those names. Yeah. And a fourth shall be richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, by building his army that is, he shall stir up against all against the kingdom of Greece. So this is the fourth of the Persian kings. Who is this? In history, if you know history, which you really have to study it to have any idea, it's Xerxes of Persia. He will be the fourth king, staking everything on the invasion of the rival kingdom of Greece. So remember, these two are going to fight. The Medes and the Persians. Of course, Greece is going to totally smash the ram. The he-goat smashes the ram. Greece smashes the Persians. So sorry, Xerxes, nice try, but God already determined you're a loser. We read then, I'm trying to bring it into the modern for you, you know. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. You might guess this one. Who comes in Greece to destroy all these Persian kings? Alexander the Great. The heroic Alexander, warlike Alexander, king of Macedonia and Greece, who came to rule with a tyrannical authority, and he just charged across the ancient world like the he-goat, smashing everything, destroying the kingdoms of the Persians. What's that? Okay. Okay. All right. I tell you to stay after class, but most of you are already for the board meeting, so whatever. Verse 4. And when he had arisen, namely Alexander, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven. So what happened? Okay, let's say, but not to his posterity, nor according to the dominion which he had ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. This is actually fairly easy to understand. Alexander the Great was, he ruled, he was number one guy, lead conqueror of everything, but he died kind of young, I think in the early 30s. And he was broken, and his kingdom, Greece, over all that region of the ancient world, was divided into four winds, the four kingdoms, which is up here, by the way. These are the four kingdoms of Greece, the Hellenistic world. And so you have, this is going to come up prominently tonight, the Antigonids, who are just a little tiny group over here. Forget them, we're not even talking about them hardly tonight. The independent states up here in these upper parts, Turkey and etc. Forget them, we're not really talking about them much tonight. It's mostly these two, which is the other two of the four, the Seleucids over here, and the Ptolemaic empire down over here. That's where we're going to see the great battles, especially taking place in Daniel chapter 11, between those two upcoming. So Alexander swiftly conquered the ancient world as the he-goat. He was broken, namely he died. His kingdom divided into four kingdoms, namely four kings, after the battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. So God's even foretelling these things to us, exactly what's going to happen before it does. It will not go to a seed or dynasty, namely his children were killed. There was no offspring of Alexander to take it up, but it went to four generals, who then are four kings. There was a fifth one, but he was wiped out so fast, it's really just four. The natural heirs of Alexander were eliminated, his two sons killed. Verse 5. Then the king of the south, that's why I get to use this wonderful, I love sticks, big sticks. I speak softly though, I carry a big stick. Then the king of the south, namely the ruler of Egypt, this is before, it becomes the ruler of Egypt shall be strong. But one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. Unless you know history, it's like, what on earth are you talking about? I have no idea. Well, here we go. This could be Seleucus Nicator, one of the four Greek kings who was stronger than the ruler of Egypt and ruled over him. Okay, so the king of the south, the ruler of Egypt, shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. So it could be Seleucus Nicator, one of the four Greek kings, and his kingdom extended from Phrygia on the west to Indus on the east. So it's going to extend over this direction, I guess. Going on to the next verse, verse 6, right? After some years, they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make peace. Again, if you don't know history, it's like, what on earth? Let's jump to Daniel 12. No, we'll read this here. This is good. The king of the south and the king of the north form a confederacy. So we're talking about up here in the Syria area and down here towards Egypt. So make a confederacy. That is when Antiochus II Theos, the second successor of Seleucus Nicator, remember the Seleucid, these are the Seleucid Greek areas. So Seleucus Nicator, so that's the Seleucids there. The Ptolemies, the Seleucids of the two kingdoms of Greece there. Okay, so you got, remember, the north and the south. King of the north, king of the south is usually how it's going to go here. Okay, they form a confederacy when Antiochus II, the successor of Seleucus Nicator here, married Bernice, the daughter of Ptolemus Philadelphus. Okay, so they made marriage alliances in those days. If you don't want to attack me and I don't want to attack you, give me your daughter to wife. And she'll come and live in my house. I'll give you my daughter. You can have mine, although in this case it's just one. That way I'll know that we'll have a marriage alliance. Namely, we won't attack each other's kingdoms because you got our daughters. You got mine, I got yours. So these two kings, both part of the old Grecian Empire, make a marriage alliance as was done in those days. Then we go on. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm. In other words, this alliance does not strengthen them, though, as they wished. They have the marriage alliance between the north and the south, but and Bernice was given to be married as the kind of go-between, but it didn't work out. Fell apart. And he and his offspring shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants, her child, and he who got possession of her. Again, it's like, what? Okay, here we go. Secular accounts, according to Kretzmann, set forth the situation as follows. I'll just read it. As soon as Ptolemy Philadelphus died in 247 BC, Antiochus Theos expelled Bernice, whom he'd married, the daughter of this guy. He says, all right, your dad's dead, you're out. And recalled his formerly rejected love, Laodice. So he says, I don't want you as my wife anymore because he's gone. Let me get Laodice back, which was his previous lover. The latter, however, aimed further at revenge. Bernice did. And to achieve it, she poisoned the king and had the son that she had by him, Seleucus II Callinicus, declared successor and sent assassins against Bernice. So Laodice poisoned the king, sent assassins against Bernice, who fled to the sanctuary of Paphne. The latter queen was slain together with her little son, and the hope of the Ptolemies to behold one of their own lineage on the throne of the Seleucid Empire was thus wholly destroyed. Okay, so in other words, marriage alliance doesn't work out. Take the other girl. She wants to kill the other one. Kills. It's a big mess. You know, when I was reading this, I wrote on my notes, Clinton body count. You ever, you know, it's alleged, of course, but it seems like dead bodies follow the other female of in high authority in our land wherever she goes. In the same kind of way, there's nothing new under the sun. One, you know, oh no, you're not there anymore, and I want my son here, and now you're going to get killed, and I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to poison the king, and yada, yada, yada. It's just, I also wrote on here, it's good to be the little guy. Isn't it? A little baker, a little farmer, just, alms for the poor, whatever. You're way better off in most eras of the world being just the little guy. Because when you get up into the upper realms, Remember when they were trying to say to Trump, was Wallace, the commentator on Fox News in 2016, he's like, "You've destroyed people's lives." He's like, Chris, you don't understand. The people I destroyed, they were killers. These are not your little old grandmas. You know, when you get up into the hedge fund people and the heads of factories and the heads of countries and lobbyists and all these high places, you don't want to be there. Be content to be little people. Because when you get up there, the intrigue, the murder, the evils that go on in high places, you don't want anything to do with it. So be happy God has called you from a low estate and low station. Okay, in those times, verse 7, a branch from her roots shall arise in his place. Okay, he shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. So a shoot out of the apparently dead stock, a relative, shall stand up to take his place in the controversy, namely her own brother, Ptolemy III Euergetes. So a branch comes from her roots. So another guy rises, not the direct line to the king, but nevertheless a relative, a cousin, basically. He came up with an army against all the strongholds of the northern power kingdom, such that the entire Syrian country from Cilicia to beyond Tigris was conquered, numerous fortresses taken, and Laodice, that wonderful person that we talked about previously that's out killing people, the rival and murderess of Bernice, was slain. Okay, so he comes up and he shall deal with them and prevail. So he comes up here, gets revenge, kills Laodice, who killed Bernice, and takes over all the way to Cilicia. I'm not sure where that is exactly. Somebody know exactly? About where I was. Oh, Cilicia, right there. Yep, Cilicia. All right, so he takes over all that all the way over to the Tigris, which is over here. All right, so that's Ptolemy III Euergetes. And I wrote on here on the side, too, about Laodice. She got her just deserts. Because, you know, God does bring a person's deeds back upon their own heads. If you should slay the blood of man who is made in the image of God, by man shall your blood be slain. God is an avenger. Let's never forget. Verse 8, he shall also carry off to Egypt their gods with their molten images. So he came from down here, he conquered all up there, and he's going to carry back down to Egypt where he lives in the Ptolemaic part of the empire. Their molten images with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. So, hey, I beat you soundly, I take all your booty, and I'm going to come back here with all your treasures and hang out for a little while. That's the vernacular. Okay, and where he ruled for some time in Egypt. Then verse 9, then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return into his own land. This was fulfilled in the expedition of Seleucus from the north here, Calonicus, in which he sent a fleet against Egypt, coming down here to fight, which, however, was destroyed in a storm, while his army was defeated and overthrown. So he shall return to his own land. Sorry, failed campaign. Wow, a lot of trouble when you get sin involved in the world, isn't there? People just after each other. And what is everybody after? Ambition, selfish ambition, jealousy, as James says in James chapter 4. That's where devilish wisdom is, and every vile practice is with selfish ambition, to gain worldly gold and treasures for yourself, power in this life, which is but temporary, transient, ephemeral, passing away like a stream dried up. So don't go for the riches of this world, friends. Go for the riches of heaven. They're eternal, and the wise of the earth shall pursue it. Okay. Verse 10. Verse 10? Yeah. His sons shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, which shall come on and overthrow and pass through. His sons, those of the northern kingdom, shall wage war against the southern kingdom, the activities of Antiochus the Great in his victorious advance upon Egypt being here described. So Antiochus, it's one of the two Antiochuses we need to know about tonight. Antiochus the Great, that's the first one. We're going to get to Antiochus the Fourth with the destruction of the Jewish temple later. Antiochus the Great comes down here, slams Egypt, and wins. And again shall carry the war as far as his fortress, very likely the fortified city of Gaza, says Kurtzman. Then the king of the south, moved with anger, because he's been attacked, shall come out and fight with the king of the north, and he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. This undoubtedly describes the attack made by Ptolemy Philopator, by which he tried to break the power of Antiochus. So Antiochus is coming and attacking. Ptolemy Philopator tries to break back through, by which he tried to break the power of Antiochus. Antiochus, the Seleucid king, though, he wins in the battle. Remember, this is all spoken of before it ever takes place. To Daniel. Verse 12, and when the multitude is taken, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. Or King James, he shall not be strengthened by it. So Antiochus won the battle, okay? And he got proud. He killed tens of thousands in the battle of Raphia near Gaza. Gaza is over here. Remember, that's where all the battle is today still. Nothing's new under the sun, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but here's Gaza. We were going to do a trip to Israel, actually. Can't go there because there's war in Gaza still now. So that's Gaza's right here on the edge of Israel on the sea, which is basically the Philistines, the country of the Philistines. Philistia. Okay. I said that like Trump, didn't I? Philistia. China. Sorry. I haven't even been watching him very much, but it just comes out. Okay. But he did not follow up his victory with any degree of energy, so he wasn't strengthened by it. So he won, but hey, dude, you need to push through and finish the job. No, he didn't. He didn't get really strengthened by the battle and the victory. Verse 13, for the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the former, and after some years he shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. So this was about 13 years later, according to history, when Antiochus the Great strengthened himself by successful campaigns against the kingdoms towards the east. So he's fighting all the time, gets stronger. Now he's all ready to go attack again. So his army was composed of veterans and his equipment the very best, a war-hardened army. Verse 14, in those times many shall rise against the king of the south and the men of violence among your own people. Speaking to Daniel here, by the way, of the Jews, shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. So many insurrections caused by bad administration of affairs at home. And violent people revolt against him. Okay, Antiochus the Great, that is. Namely, when a number of Jews entered into a league with Antiochus the Great against Egypt. So a number of the unfaithful Jews, just throwing in their lot with the big strong guy, the bully in the neighborhood, say, we're with you. They go down and fight here, but they fail. Doesn't work out for them. Verse 15, then the king of the north, Antiochus the Great, shall come and throw up siege works and take a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not stand, or even his picked troops, for there shall be no strength to stand, but he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, and all of it shall be in his power. So Antiochus, the victor of Panias, near the sources of the Jordan, now overran the entire country, and he stands in the glorious land, which is Israel, the Holy Land. He's taken over all the Holy Land, which was, by the way, Ptolemaic, right? But because Tyre is way up here, so Israel was part of the Ptolemaic. Antiochus the Great has now taken over all that area, standing in the glorious land of the Jews, God's people. And all of it's in his power. Verse 17. He shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and he shall bring terms of peace and perform them. He shall give him the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not stand or be to his advantage. So Antiochus will seek to further subjugate the rest of the country, and he'll give his daughter Cleopatra interesting, for a marriage alliance of peace to Ptolemy Epiphanes. That's the same, Epiphanes. Epiphanes is what I use on my boat to do the varnish. Epiphanes is the guy of way long ago. So, at any rate, gives his daughter, again, another marriage alliance. A marriage which takes place 5 years later, but she will not be able to carry out the plans of her father. It doesn't work out. This whole marriage alliance, once again, falls to pieces. Doesn't work out. Verse 18, afterward he, namely the king of the north, Antiochus the Great, shall turn his face toward the coastlands of the Mediterranean. So he's going to go try to take out all this area, and shall take many of them, but a commander shall put an end to his insolence, and he shall turn his insolence back upon him. So the men in command of the islands and the coastlands promptly repulsed his attacks as he starts to take over these islands. They fight back, and he was obliged to retire to his fortresses formerly in his power, back over here. Verse 19, then he shall turn his face back toward the fortresses of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and shall not be found. Repulsed by these attacks, he turns back to his own places of power, but he's killed in an insurrection of the inhabitants of Elymaeus. So, goodbye, Antiochus the Great. He's killed, and down he goes. So we can put him out of the picture. We're done with Antiochus the Great. Verse 20, it's going to be his successor. Okay? Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute through the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. So this is a guy between Antiochus the Great and Antiochus Epiphanes. A little guy appears for just a tiny little bit of time. His name is Seleucus. One rose after him who sent oppressors through the land, but he, Seleucus Philopater, was poisoned by Heliodorus, his former favorite, who sought the crown for himself. So once again, good to be the little guy. A lot of poisonings up there. So Seleucus of the Seleucid Empire, being the successor to Antiochus the Great, he's going to go send a tax guy running through the kingdom and exact tribute and stuff, but, well, he gets poisoned very quickly, so he only gets one verse. Thus the Lord directs, says Kretzmann, the fortunes of individuals and nations and punishes such as oppose his plans for the benefit of his people. God, once again, being in command overarchingly over all of history. Okay, now let's set all those guys aside. We get on to who's the next big guy? Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the Fourth. He's the really, really, really bad guy. These are all bad guys, okay? But this is a really bad guy. He's going to be the one that's going to desecrate the temple in Jerusalem later on. Verses 21 to 32 pertain to him. So it would say, verse 21, in his place shall arise a contemptible person, to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Now comes in Antiochus Epiphanes by deceitful behavior, and he seized the throne before men really even realized what he was doing. So a very tricky guy. He's a sneak. He's a sly, and he got it by flatteries. Verse 22, armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, and the prince of the covenants also. He subdues all, even princes of his own covenant. If they come against him, he'd overthrow them. So this guy gets victory where he turns, like a lot of wicked people do for a time, like Hitler. Victory for a little while, but not for long. Verse 23, I'll just read it all the way down to 25. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. Oh, no honesty in... What is that from Master and Commander? That'd be looking for like an honest man in Parliament, trying to find the Acheron in the Pacific. So you're not going to find an honest person. He's deceitful. He shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. And he shall stir up his power, and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for plots shall be devised against him. This was fulfilled when Antiochus Epiphanes overthrew Philometor of Egypt. So he came down and beat him. Antiochus Epiphanes. Victory meeting at every turn. Some of whose trusted advisors espoused the cause of the enemy. In other words, some of the people of the kings of the south, some of his advisors, even when down comes Antiochus Epiphanes, they're like, well, he's going to win. Let's throw in our lot with him and commit treachery against the king of the south. Verse 26. Even those who eat his rich food shall be his undoing. His armies shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. So even the very members of the Egyptian royal household, the king's own ministers, become guilty of such treachery, turning and going and throwing in their league with Antiochus Epiphanes on his way down to conquer. Verse 27. And as for the two kings, their minds shall be bent on mischief. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail. For the end is yet to be at the time appointed. Once again, everything's appointed, by the way, in times. Remember what we said on New Year's Eve, if you were here? Everything has its appointed times with God, so that's a good comfort for us. We have our appointed time, and it's a good thing. You've come to the kingdom for just such a time as this. God knows your birth and your time of departure before you even started, and he knows your days, and he determines them as you put your trust in him. And he shall return to his land with great substance, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant, and he shall work his will and return to his own land. So Antiochus Epiphanes returns with much booty secured from Egypt. So yeah, I won down here. I'm going to return with a lot of gold and silver, etc. He sets his heart against the holy covenant. What is that? That's the divine institution of the Jewish theocracy. Israel, the Jewish people in their country, as representing the visible church of God at that time, the Jews did. And he works various atrocities as he marches through Judea, and as the book of the Maccabees relate. What's the Maccabees? If you were ever in the Roman Catholic Church, that's in the Apocrypha, which we don't consider canonical scripture. And I read Maccabees on the flight to Texas to see Naomi a couple times ago when I saw her. I almost finished the book. It just does not read like Scripture or the Holy Spirit at all. It's interesting, but it just does not have the flavor at all of Holy Writ. But it's nevertheless recording the revolt of the Jews against, Antiochus is charging through their own country. The Jews that want to remain faithful to God have to wage war, as always, against an occupying army. Judas Maccabeus, hence the Maccabean rebellion, occurs. Verse 29, at the time appointed he shall return and come into the south. In another campaign against Egypt, after winning, he's going to turn around. Oh, let's get Egypt again. We got him last time. Let's get him again. But it shall not be this time as it was before. The triumphs of the other campaigns will not be repeated. So you should have quit while you're ahead there, buddy. I'm just trying to throw in my vernacular to make it real in your minds, hopefully. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and give heed to those who forsake the holy covenant. Okay, to those who forsake the holy covenant. So what's going to happen here? While he's coming down here for a second win he hopes to get, a fleet comes against him from the direction of Cyprus, up there. From the west, in this case, a Roman embassy with a number of ships. The Roman emissaries, notice we're getting into Rome now, landing in Alexandria, which is down here, right there, in order to prevent the Syrian king from conquering Egypt, that is Antiochus Epiphanes from conquering down here. So he must turn back in his anger. Oh no, the navy has arrived. I have to go back up to my country through Israel, and boy, he's angry that he didn't get the win. So what is he going to do? Because his plans were foiled, he vents his wrath throughout Judea in acts of greed and plunder. As I'm going through, rob, steal, kill, burn, fire, rape, get plunder as he goes through. And he fixed his attention upon the apostates in Judea, who forsook the Lord and made them his favorites. So if any Jew was not faithful to God, to Yahweh, to the true God, and was just an earthly, devilish Jew, he loved those guys. since you don't like that God of Israel, I don't like him either. Come and I'll make you my favorites. And established an idolatrous religion with their assistance in Israel. This is all history. Verse 31, forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress and shall take away the continual burnt offering. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Oh my, there it is again. That's the very important thing that the little horn does, and Daniel chapter 9, etc., that he's going to desecrate the temple. And that's exactly what he did. The reference being to an altar of idolatry, which Antiochus Epiphanes erected on Jehovah's altar of burnt offering. Antiochus, on his way home from Egypt, sent Apollonius with 20,000 men to destroy Jerusalem 2 years after its capture by himself. Apollonius slew multitudes, dismantled and pillaged the city. The soldiers then from a fortress which they built commanding the temple fell on and slew the worshippers, so that the temple service was discontinued. No more offering of sacrifices for the Jews. Also Antiochus decreed that all on pain of death should conform to the Greek religion, and the temple was consecrated to Jupiter Olympus. So Jerusalem temple is now consecrated to Jupiter of the Greeks. That's desecrating the temple, isn't it? Identifying himself with this god, Antiochus Epiphanes, I am this God manifest, and so many words, with fanatical haughtiness wished to make his own worship universal. Worship me, ha 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 ha. Terrible guy. This sounds a lot like Daniel chapter 9, which you can look at another time. So it's another way we can understand this is Daniel 9 is at least about this, in part. Verse 32, he shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God, faithful Jews, shall stand firm and take action. The Maccabean revolt, and those among the people who are wise shall make many understand, though they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder for some days. These words evidently prophesying the uprising which took place at the time of the Maccabees. They were actually a family of Maccabees, not a hive of Maccabees, or swarm, no, a family. Oh, they called each other honey, though. No, just kidding. No, okay. When the faithful among the Jews, they'd say, go out and be courageous. I'm just kidding. Okay, no. When the faithful among the Jews... Okay. Although with great losses to themselves overcame their oppressors. So the Maccabees actually did win ultimately, but with a lot of great losses, and Judas Maccabeus himself actually died eventually. Verse 34, when they fall, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery, and some of those who are wise shall fall, to refine and to cleanse them, and to make them white until the time of the end, for it is yet for the time appointed. Okay, so now when they fall and sacrifice themselves for their religious principles, the faithful Jews, and their fighting against Antiochus Epiphanes, they shall receive a little help, for the theocratic kingdom was retained as a result of their efforts. But many shall cleave to them with flatteries, hypocritically casting the lot with the victorious party of the Jews in order to save themselves. Because the Jews are winning, you always want to side with the good guy, or with the winner. With the winner. And some of them of understanding shall fall, death and various attendant tribulations taking their toll, to try them and to purge them and to make them white even until the time of the end. For all these afflictions would serve as trials, and separating the dross from the pure metal. In other words, God always uses tribulations like this, and even battles, and even defeats or whatever, to purge his people and to make them white till the time of the end. So in our present battles, you're just being made the whiter and the purer by them. Because it is yet for a time appointed. That is, the period of tribulation would extend until then. Thus the enemies, in trying to harm the believers, succeed only in contributing to the purifying of God's people, in the great process of winnowing out the real from the false, the hypocritical from the true. It will be readily seen that the entire description of the career of Antiochus Epiphanes shows him to have been a bitter opponent of the true God. By an ignoring of the factor of time now, which is peculiar to prophetic utterances, the following section is devoted to a description of Antichrist, of whom Antiochus was a type. So, Remember how we said much of it was about Antiochus, the little horn, but that it also pertains to the Roman armies and then eventually to the Pope, the ultimate Antichrist, right? Well, we're going to see, according to Kretzmann, it's going to jump up to the higher levels now, really speaking of our days. Do we have time for this? I don't know that we do. I think we maybe better stop there, because it's almost to the end, but that's too much to cover in 5 minutes. It's an exceptionally long chapter, but we got quite some way through it, and it's rather exciting. Maybe the thing to understand from this, especially, is that God appoints times and seasons. When you go through history, as we're going through history, it can, or your own personal lives, or the destinies of nations like our United States of America, it can seem like, oh my goodness, it's a complete free-for-all. And, everything's up in the air, it's total pandemonium. Do you think God knows what's going to happen to the end of time for our country and every other country from even before it started? Look at this. He knows all this stuff in Daniel's day. Which king's going to win, what he's going to do, what he's going to feel like, whether he's going to be successful, marriage alliances, failures of these things, deaths, conspiracies, plottings, successes in battle and victory for the righteous, for the wicked. He knows everything. And so God is, just know that his hand is wonderfully upon your life. It's not out of control. You're wonderfully exactly set where God wants you to be. You've come to the kingdom for just such a time as this. And while there's a drive of God of all history in your lives, at the same time, you're also making it up as you go. Namely, God does work with us and our choices that we make through life as if we're making it up as we go, even though he already knows what you're going to do. And that is, again, one of those divine mysteries that Lutherans are willing to live with. Does God determine your life, or do you? Yes. God determines it, and your choices are also determining it. How do those two go together? Well, they just do, in some mysterious way. Like I've always said, I moved this little ant once across the ground. I put two little sticks down. I said, can I make this little ant walk through that goalpost? Well, the ant was making all of its little free choices, didn't even know who I was, doesn't know what a human is. And yet I would set up a stick here, a rock here, I'd place my hand here. Every time it came up against a roadblock, it would go in a different direction. And I made it in a short time walk right through the two goalposts I wanted it to do. It was making all of its own free will choices, but I was also directing its course of history to know exactly where he's going to go and where I wanted to put him. And so I think in a similar way, maybe it falls short at some point, that illustration, but we're making free choices, and God works with us in our free choices as we're going to serve him or not. And hopefully it's always to serve him. But know that God loves you, and he has a destiny for you, and he's going to see that you get through the goalpost that he is aiming to get you through. And it's by his power, by his sovereign will, by his royal scepter and decree being held forth from his throne on high. These shall succeed and win, and the victory shall be given to them at the proper time. And that's the great blessings of Daniel. And this is all victory found in Jesus Christ, which God then gives to you through Christ as a co-heir with him of all things. All right, we'll finish this other part next week. Thank you, and God bless you.